the bigger picture. He was always thinking big, alayhi salatu wasalam. He was never, as much as we think in the mentality of, and the attitude or the mindset of Muslims. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was very rarely focused on details, on small details. He rarely did that, almost never. But he was always thinking big, alayhi salatu wasalam, and teaching people to do that. And we tend to like to focus on detail. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with studying his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, trying to be as similar to him as we can in terms of detail. I don't think it's wrong. But I think it's a problem when we stop right there. And that becomes the obsession. And that becomes the extent of our understanding of him, alayhi salatu wasalam. We cheapen something very valuable, and we cheat ourselves out of really connecting to this great man and to this person who was able to change the world within such a short period of time. Anyways, so I'm going to narrate a hadith that kind of talk about that. And this hadith is a very famous hadith. It's an asl of, it is one of the origins within usul al-fiqh. It's a hadith that is well documented and depended upon. And this is what Aisha said. قالت ما رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي سبحة الضحى قط وإني لأسبحها وفي رواية وإني لأستحبها وإن كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليدع العمل وهو يحبه خشية أن يعمل به الناس فيفرض عليهم. And I'll explain what this hadith means. So the Prophet ﷺ, this is what Aisha says. She said, I never saw him praying Subhat al-Duha. Subhat al-Duha is Salat al-Duha. Now, she doesn't mean ever. She means I never saw him during any period of time of his life doing it every single day in a row. That's what she means. Because she's the one who told us that he used to pray it, and she's the one who gave us the number of rak'at. She taught us this. But what she means here is that I never saw throughout my life him doing it daily, every single day. Never. He's always, some days he did it and some days he didn't. And she knows that best because her house was right beside the masjid. The door would open to the masjid. So she saw him alayhi salatu in the masjid. So she knew if he was doing something or not. قالت وإني لأسبحها وإني لأستحبها. And she said, but for myself, I always do it. I like it. I like people to do that. And I always pray it every single day. And this also teaches us how he taught the Sahaba to understand the religion. Like, he didn't do it every single day. So maybe the proper following of him, alayhi salatu wasalam, was to do the same. But no, she said, I do it every day. Because her understanding of Islam is of that nature. She understands that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had a bigger idea in his mind. And then she explained, وَإِنْ كَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَيَدَعُ الْعَمَلَ وَهُوَ يُحِبُّهُ. Meaning, and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam often would stop doing something, a certain action, he wouldn't do it, وَهُوَ يُحِبُّهُ, and he loves it, or he likes doing it. خَشْيَةَ أَنْ يَعْمَلَ بِهِ النَّاسِ فَيُفْرَضَ عَلَيْهِمْ. Out of fear of people seeing him do it all the time, and then they start doing it all the time, and then it becomes a fariḍah later on. And then it becomes something that is obligatory upon people later on. And this is how he used to think about it. He knew that if he did something every single day, and the Sahaba saw him, then they would want to do it every single day. And if that happened, then the scholars of Islam that came 100 years later, or 200 years later, when Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafi'i and Ahmad came and studied his life and his legacy, alayhi salatu wasalam, they would say, well, he did it every single day, and so the Sahaba, that must mean that this is one of the wajibat of salah, even though maybe he didn't say the word. Because that's how we take our evidence. We take the evidence based on not just what he says, but his actions as well, alayhi salatu wasalam. So he would often leave an action and not do it, even though he would love to do it every single day. Another thing is that Aisha, even though he didn't do it every day, she said, I like doing it every day. And I'm going to do it every day. And she did it every single day. And in the four madhahib, all four, it's a sunnah mu'akkada that should be done every single day. Right? But he didn't do it every day, alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is how you understand in Islam the idafa, meaning performing acts of worship, extra acts of worship, and holding yourself to extra acts of worship as something that is positive within our deen and that you should be doing. Not to the point where you ruin your functionality. Not to the point where where he drew the line, alayhi salatu wasalam, is someone who prays all day long and all night long, doesn't sleep. Now you don't sleep all night, you're going to sleep all day, you're not going to work, you're going to fail. That's going to ruin your functionality. Or someone who decides he's not going to get married ever, and that's going to, or someone who decides he's not going to ever break his fast. These are things that if you do, you're not going to be functional. You're going to fail. You're going to hold yourself to a standard that's impossible, that's harmful, and that does not actually please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. But when it came to extra acts of worship that he chose not to do, alayhi salatu wasalam, or he stopped, we could choose to do them every day. And yes, he didn't maybe follow a rigid way of doing tasbih, but you could. You could because you want to hold yourself to a higher standard, but as long as you don't ruin your functionality, as long as you don't sit in the masjid and quit your job just to perform your tasbihat every day. So the Prophet ﷺ would think of these things. What he cared about is that making sure that you inherited a way of life that would not hinder your ability to be successful. That's what he cared about. He focused on that piece, making sure that you would inherit a way of life that was put together in a manner that would not hinder your own functionality and not ruin your ability to achieve whatever you wanted within your life, even though that took away from him, alayhi salatu wasalam, a little bit. It took away from his own freedom of rituals and of worship and of behavior the way he would like to live his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. Why? But he's thinking bigger than just himself. You have to think of like that when you're a leader within any grouping. If you're a leader in a household, or if you're a leader in an organization of some sort, you have to think of what standard you put in front of people and what that means and how that's going to affect them and how they're going to interpret that later on in life. And it's an important piece for us to think about because alayhi salatu wasalam, he thought always about the impact of what he did, not just on his own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the relationship you're going to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala later on in life. That mattered to him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is a level of thought that most people never actually achieve. Like it's a level of thought that most people don't even go to, because our focus is just kind of on our personal endeavors and our personal relationships. No, thinking about how when we behave in a certain, when we hold ourselves to a certain standard, when we decide that this is the standard, how that's going to affect other people. And because we did that, by the way, because we have done that, because we have not, the masajid transformed from being a place or a space that is open, that is welcome, where a safe space would come in, where we hold people to standards that we think is worthy of holding people to, and it's not. We decided that the standard is you have to dress a certain way, you have to act a certain way, and that's not necessarily how we're supposed to behave. And because of that, masajid become less welcoming, less open, less safe, and then people don't come anymore. It didn't happen within a few years. It took a century or more, a couple of centuries in a row. You behave in a certain in that, and he alayhi salatu, he was thinking for his time. None of the Sahaba were going to think duha was faridah. None of them, or the tabi'een, by the way. It was going to be me and you. It was going to be us who were going to have, it was going to be 1400 years later, we're going to be stuck with evidence that if I'm going to take the evidence and break it down and use my brain and be logical, the evidence is going to tell me this is fard. He did it every day. Everyone is saying it every day. I can't with a proper conscience say that it's not fard. I have to say it's wajib. I'm going to be held to it. It's going to be impossible for me to function at work if at 9 o'clock I have to stop what I'm doing and go pray like al-duha and everyone else. So he was thinking that far into the future. We don't, so we end up in positions like these. We don't think that far into the future. We think that we're very limited in how we look at things, and then we end up. And that's why, if you want to understand why masajid are not buzzing the way they should be, and masajid aren't filled with people, because we have developed over time standards that are not appropriate. The Prophet ﷺ was making sure that the standards that he was setting out for people were appropriate. We're not going to cause them difficulty. He thought about it all the time. You have to do the same as well, and so do I. يروي الشيخان فيما اتفقا عليه من حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت ما رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يصلي صبحة الضحى قط وإني لأسبحها أو قالت وإني لأستحبها وإن كان رسول الله ليدع العمل وهو يحبه خشية أن يعمل به الناس فيفرض عليه